There was more than the usual anticipation that spring as hardwood groves burst into green and plows cut ribbons across the sandy loam fields in east-central Indiana. As in other years, the fertile farmland would yield many tons of grain and tomatoes. This year, however, 1931, was one of the cruelest of the Great Depression. Farms and livelihoods were being ravaged by forces more sinister than any Midwestern twister. Just 2 years after the crash of 1929, the country's economy was spiraling downward, taking tens of thousands of mortgaged farms with it. Farm prices were caving in. Foreclosure notices were being tacked on fence posts and county courthouses. These were the bitterest of times. Yet, in the countryside, one could momentarily forget. One day in the spring of 1931, a road crew shoveled its way up Arba Pike toward the half-dozen houses that made up the settlement of Crete. The laborers paused to take note of another sign of spring. On the front porch of a white 2-story house, on a knoll overlooking hundreds of acres of gently rolling hills, sat a tiny dark-haired woman of about 28. She was basking in the warm sun, cradling a round-faced, black-haired baby boy. The infant had been born to Lynetta Jones and her husband, James Thurman Jones, on the 13th day of May that year. They had named him James Warren Jones, and they called him Jimmy. Despite the classic mother and child image seen by the workers, motherhood was an ambivalent state of affairs for Lynetta Jones. For years before her marriage, Lynetta's steel trap of a mind had been locked on the notion that she would neither marry nor bear a child. Instead, she would pursue a business career, perhaps breaking new ground for women. She would give free rein to her individuality and ambition without the drag of a husband or a child. But personal tragedy evidently had altered the course of this would-be businesswoman. Born near Princeton, Indiana, Lynetta was the oldest child of Jesse and Mary Putnam. Lynetta grew into a rather odd combination of fanciful dreamer and aggressively ambitious achiever. Full of imagination, she felt almost as much kinship with animals as people. She even looked upon snakes as her friends. She evidently picked up her ambition from her father's foster father, a businessman named Lewis Parker, who became her paternal role model when her father died. Parker had acquired his wealth in lumber mills in southern Indiana, but when the timber ran out, he turned with less success to grain speculation. Lynetta respected him because he blended business acumen with a big heart, and she blamed his financial downfall on his generosity and humanitarianism. Extraordinarily headstrong and frugal, Lynetta aspired to follow in Lewis Parker's footsteps. She attended Jonesboro Agricultural College in Arkansas for 2 years before dropping out in 1921. A few years later, she enrolled at Lockyer Business College in Evansville, Indiana, where she also stayed for 2 years. Then, in 1925, her mother died of typhoid fever. Somehow this death reversed Lynetta's thinking about marriage and motherhood. Even before Lynetta's engagement to a Hoosier road construction worker named James T. Jones, she resolved that she would bear a single child, a boy, and he would resemble the most admirable man she knew, Lewis Parker. Although in doing so she denied a part of herself, Lynetta married James T. Jones in the late 1920s. He was 16 years her senior. Several years later, after her own bout with typhoid, she became pregnant. The baby boy, though he had Lewis Parker's brown eyes, did not quite measure up to her other expectations. From his looks, the olive-complexioned child might have been a conglomeration of every nationality in the world. His eyes were slanted, almost oriental, his face round, his hair shiny, black, and straight like an Indian's. She thought he resembled most a baby Eskimo, and an ugly one at that. When money threatened to run out, the Joneses were forced to sell their farmland, and the Depression overwhelmed them. James T. Jones dropped in tears to the living room carpet and beat the floor with his fists. "I gone as far as I can go," he cried. Bending over his body, Lynetta comforted her husband. "You cry, my love," she said with gentle determination, "but I'll whip this if it's the last thing I ever do." James T. Jones was a native Hoosier with family ties to nearby Lynn, a community of about 900 where his father was living out his final years. His family were Quakers, with a reputation for intelligence and decency. Though there was a black sheep in the family, an alcoholic who would eventually jump to his death from a bridge in nearby Richmond, most of the children had done well for themselves. James T. Jones was also known as a good man, but his life had taken a sad turn. A road construction foreman before going to France to fight in World War I, he had returned home with lungs scarred by mustard gas.